Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mike Armstrong podcast show. And this afternoon, I'm joined by Colin Machlachlan, who is ex sort of Special Forces SAS and from the TV program Who Dares Wins. And we're going to have a little chat about life and experience and business and mentality and all those sort of things. And how are you doing today, Colin? You okay?
I'm okay today, Mike. It's another drizzly day up in Scotland, so yeah, not one of those days when you want to be just curled up and either going through one of your TV series or doing a bit of writing one of those days.
Yeah. Well, I moan about the weather in Wales, but I've had the pleasure of going up to Scotland quite a few times, and you guys get it tougher than us. You know what I mean? We're always a couple of degrees warmer than you guys up there, so they do build them tough in Scotland.
Yeah, and the scenery's a bit similar, but I think sometimes you get all four seasons in one day up here. So you go out the door and you have to take sort of everything for every eventuality, which is good.
Yeah, definitely. It does teach you. I was in the Scouts when I was a kid, not quite the SAS, but it was the Scouts, and it does teach you to be prepared.
Yeah, close. I think that's the next step down is the Scouts. I think that's a natural progression into the SES from the Scouts.
Yeah, definitely. Well, to be fair, we probably could have perfected our skills at the SAS because the reason I joined the Scouts because they used to do British Bulldog and you used to have to sort of get from one side to the other, and that was a good training ground for the SAS. But I didn't pursue the career after that, like.
Yeah, escape and evasion, the real thing. I mean, that's good training for that.
Yes, we used to play a lot in the school fields as well. But forget about my youth. You're a similar sort of age to me, I'd say, Colin. You're in your 40s somewhere.
I mean, I don't look it, Mike. You're right, but yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm closer to 50 than 40 these days.
Oh, fair enough. I'm still clinging on to the early side of 40, but yeah, that was in the days when you used to be able to touch, have contact in sport and on the playground in the 80s. They didn't mind what you did. It wasn't like now that you can't play football and you can't have any contact, especially in COVID. Now there's no contact, but yeah, back then they used to let you do anything you wanted. You'd end up often on a pile up underneath about 75 other people.
Well, I mean, that's why the Welsh rugby team's so good. I mean, British Bulldog, pile-ups, I mean, that's your classic sort of scrum and wing play, isn't it? No wonder the Welsh rugby team's so good.
Yeah, exactly. That I didn't realise that was the grounding for the scrum, but it obviously was. But anyway, moving back onto more professional side of things, really, the SAS. Obviously, I've heard you talk a couple of times about your experiences in the SAS. So give us something a little bit different to tell us a little bit about. I don't know. Tell us a little bit about the training side of it. I knew to cover that. And obviously, a lot of people know it's hard to get into the SES. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the selection process, I often think the selection process for the SES is probably one of the things a lot of people know more about than some of the other stuff. Certainly when it came to training to get into the SES, I was lucky. My OC at the time, Guy Richardson, former coach of the British Lions, he let me away do some training to get into the SES. But I think it was about 2 weeks before the start of selection, and I had about a week. So I had to be quite limited and clever with what the sort of things that I did for the training. So I did things like the fan dance, some of the pipeline stuff, point to point, and then the last part of endurance, because endurance is about 70 kilometers over 20 hours. So you want to have the last sort of third to a quarter of that in your head as muscle memory, because you'll be tired, fatigued, hungry, it'll be at night, it'll be dark. So you want to have that in your head. So that was the sort of training I'd done immediately before it.
Did they do when you were doing the SAS? Did they do the things that you see on the telly where they kidnap you in the middle of the night and take you somewhere in a hood?
Yeah, there's different phases to selection. So selection runs for 6 months. And the first 4 weeks is aptitude. That's all stuff on the hills, navigating, 4Ks an hour over the beacon stuff. And then And then you go on to sort of jungle stuff for about 6 weeks. And that's micronavigation, being quite aggressive in your contact drills, being good sort of general infantry type skills. And then you do a piece where you go on the run and you get kidnapped and stuff, and you go through resistance to interrogation, and then you do other things like the parachuting side of things and CQB and stuff. So yeah, it's a long process, and obviously it's 6 months, and you only get a week, 8 days or so with the recruits on the Channel 4 series. So you've got to really strip down what it is you want to do. And so yeah, in the individual sort of segments, they're similar, but nowhere near what 6 months of sort of grueling selection process entails.
Yeah, that's right. Because I just finished a 75-day challenge, which is called 75 Hard, and if you like, it's the longevity of stuff. Sometimes that's what makes it hard. It's the constant, doing stuff for 6 months, hardcore, pushing your body to the limits. It's testing.
Yeah, and you've got to be relatively lucky not to keep sort of injury free, and you're always under sort of microscopic scrutiny. So you can second guess yourself sometimes, and I think it's more of a mental challenge than any sort of physical. Everybody on it's fit, but the ones that separate the ones at the end from the start is normally that mental robustness to be able to keep going when sort of everything's up against you.
Yeah, well, I think when you take it down to most industries or wherever, the mental toughness is always the edge, isn't it? I watch a lot of sport, and ultimately, there's a lot of people who can do the muscle memory and the skills and the talents and the tricks and all of that. But ultimately, the difference comes down to, the difference between winners and losers is a winning mentality or a I will not give in mentality a lot of the time,
Yeah, totally. And you see it in sports athletes, sports teams. And just last night, just yesterday, Andy Murray was playing back again. He was 2 sets down in his sort of first sort of professional comeback since getting his hip done. And he 2-0 down, everything looked against him. And he came back to win 3-2. And when you look at sports, some of the bigger athletes and some of the bigger sports team, it's that ability to not concentrate on, focusing on the things that you're not doing well or thinking this has passed me by and I'm not playing well, so I may as well not, continue. It's the ability to just go, well, there's everything. There's always, until, that fat lady sings, I'm just going to keep going. And that's the same if you're a sports team and it goes to penalty kicks or whatever. It's about keeping in that right headspace to give yourself the best chance of success. Because when it comes down to penalty kicks, it's nothing about whether you can kick a ball into a net. Everybody can do that. It's about whether you can do it under pressure. And that's when you see people completely missing the target or, flopping it. It's a mental thing rather than any physical or tactical ability.
Yeah, that's why a lot of the time, like when you're watching penalty shootouts, I love watching penalty shootouts. I love the drama of, sport and everyone fighting out to the death. And so I love like boxing matches when it's like round 10, 11, 12, when they're just slugging at each other. And I love football and rugby when it's end to end. And, that to me is like two, colossal giants not giving in and just going toe to toe. And whatever the sport may be, I like it when it gets to that point. And penalties, is like often, it's been two colossus teams in a final or something. They haven't been able to work it out, and then it's down to penalties, and it's who can hold their nerve. And that's why they say, a lot of the time they don't practice the penalties, although it's still good to get that muscle memory in and practice it. But you can't put the same conditions on the mentality and all of that. And often you can see people walking up, you can see whether they're going to score their penalty or not.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of similarities between now how individuals and sports teams train for these big events and how the military do it, because the military have always tried to emulate the conditions around these scenarios coming so that when it happens, it doesn't seem a big shock. It doesn't seem like a drain on your mental faculties. It's a space you've been before. And so you're not fazed by it and you're going through what seems just a drill like any other day. And that's when you become less affected by outside sort of things going on and deal with only what's in your control and not worry about the other stuff. And the military's like that, particularly special forces. We put ourselves in these really harsh training environments so that when it comes to the real thing, we can deal with it better. And I think individuals, athletes, sports teams do the same. They put harsh sort of, 4 attackers on 2 defenders and just intense to try and sort of emulate those harsh conditions so that anything else is either easier or the same, and they're never out of their depths. And that's why sometimes you see now people practicing penalty kicks for that very reason.
Yeah. It's why, like, kids, for example, should play football for, say, 120 minutes or something. If you always practice a little bit more than what you're actually going to have to do, then it becomes easier. Like when I started out in sales, I started doing door-to-door sales, and I was selling double glazed windows, and everything I've ever done since then has been easier.
Yeah, and I think that's a good sort of metaphor for life. If you sort of train harder than what it comes for sort of real life, then you'll never be caught short and you'll always be within your comfort zone. And it's always good to put yourself out of your comfort zone sometimes. And I think that sort of always reaching and never quite getting there is always a good sort of attitude to have. You're always trying to improve tomorrow than what you were today and stuff like that. And I think that's good, because a lot of people know the SAS motto, who dares wins, but very few know our ethos, which is the continuing and unrelenting pursuit of excellence. Yeah. You're always trying to improve and, get better, but you're never quite getting there, and you realize that, and you're never too old not to learn new stuff, and that's always a good attribute to have.
Yeah. It's definitely, I'm a massive rugby fan, and it's what Warren Gatland had done to the Welsh team. They trained as hard as they played, and there'd be quite a lot of injuries in training and stuff, because he wasn't like, oh, well, we'll train, light 70-80%, and then when we turn up on the match day, we'll put it on. It's like, no, we'll train harder than we're going to need to play on the day, so that we're ready for every situation that comes. And that's what the SAS has done with its excellent world-renowned training, is it's training you for for those odd days that you get. They don't come all the time, but when they do come, you're fully trained for it and prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about rugby. I remember doing a talk a few years ago with the Scotland set up the rugby squad, and their big thing at the time was one team as one. It was about getting the best out of the team, regardless of all the different individuals that came together within the team. And I think the very next game they went out and they played England. So I was curious to see how they would get on. And it was half time, and I think they were about 25-0 down. And I thought, oh my God, like my talk couldn't have had a worse impact. And they came out the second half, and it was one of those amazing games. I think it finished something like 38-all, and England were lucky to get away with a draw. And it sort of made me quite proud. And I think it's very rarely would you have matches like that now, where a team is that far down at half time that they don't care. They come out, and the second half's a new half. And even if they're going out just to win the second half, they're going out to make their stamp, And no, it was great. It was a great game of rugby.
I remember that game. I don't remember it as well as the one where Wales was down massively at half time against Scotland, and then we managed to score in about 8 minutes of injury time. You probably would have forgotten that one, but I remember that one well.
I don't remember that one as well. I'm sure there was less riding on that. Was that a friendly or something?
Yeah, probably. I think Shane Williams popped up with a try, and I think it was the latest ever try I've ever seen. Like it was like almost like in the third half. Impossible.
Yeah. And the football team have done that. I think they were 2-1 up against England, and I think England scored in the 94th minute or something to equalise. I think it would have been the only time we've beaten England in about 156 years or something. But no, they're good, and sports good, and having these metaphors for the sort of crossover between the mental and the physical side.
Yeah, well, it's important, isn't it? Because, like I say, it doesn't really matter, It doesn't really matter how physical you are. If you haven't got the right mentality, you could be, it's a waste, really. Your physicality could be a waste. And it doesn't matter how small you are or petite you are, if you have the right mentality, you know, some of the strongest women I've ever met in the world have been like 5 foot. You know what I mean? Some of the strongest men I've ever met in the world have been like 5 foot. You know what I mean? Sometimes
Yeah, and
it's not about your size, it's about your ability and your mentality.
yeah, and that goes back to, I mean, the Royal Scots, my first regiment, some of the best soldiers were the smallest soldiers, and the same, you know, at Hereford. And I think that that's sort of almost how the SAS were formed. It wasn't because they were the biggest unit with, you know, the biggest weapons. It was because they were really small units, but they were very, you know, tactically well equipped, and they had the mentality to be able to cause mass destruction far bigger than the size of their unit. And so, you know, a 6-man patrol was capable of almost diverting a brigade in terms of resources and stuff like that. And so if you've got lots of these small teams around, they punch far heavier than their weight.
Yeah, but I think as well, actually going back to what we were talking about and how you start off, I think as well, these short people, a lot of the time, they have a hard time in school as well. So they start off battling and fighting, and actually they become really good battlers and fighters through life because they started off early.
Yeah, and you talk about good battlers for life. One of my good friends, I had the fortune of meeting Rob Burrows down at Leeds Rhinos. And you know, you talk about rugby league, it's a big, hard sport, and these guys crunching into each other. And you know, Rob's tiny, but like the heart of a lion. And you know, would just like go through people, and you know, and he's an epitome for that sort of size. Isn't anything to hold you back. It can be an advantage if your heart mind's in the right place. And you see that now with his battles with MNDs. He's a huge character.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's a fascination. But yeah, there's lots of a lot of ginger people as well are good at sport, and they're tough as well because they have to have the same thing. It's hard in school, and they got to sort of learn to grow a thick skin and to not care what other people say or think, and it teaches them how to be resilient, really.
Yeah, and I don't want to be gingerous, you know, but up in Scotland we have our fair share of the guas up here, and you know they're often not nowhere to be seen on hot sunny days, but on days when you need that warrior Celtic spirit, they're out in numbers, you know. So no, big up for the gingers.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I always think they're solid, dependable, hard grafters, like you know what I mean, usually. So yeah, so moving on from the training then, tell us a little bit about sort of life as an SAS operative.
Yeah, I guess it depends what era you're in, you know. And I was fortunate that the sort of period I was in, sort of 2000 onwards, that decade was really busy for the special forces. And so we were everywhere from Ireland, Sierra Leone, Balkans, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, you know, all these places that, you know, we managed to get away. And that operational intensity, that cycle was quite busy. Whereas if you'd have maybe been in sort of, you know, 80s, 90s, up to about 2000, probably Ireland, the Falklands, that would have been the majority of what you would have seen. So it was a really busy time. And so you spend a lot of the time away, and you go through this cycle where you're supposed to do courses and promotion stuff and go on trips and stuff, but actually you have quite a busy operational cycle. So some of that stuff sort of has to give way. But a typical cycle in the SAS is 2 years, these 4 6 month cycles, where you'll go from either operations to training to promotional courses and back round again. And training never really stops when you go into the SAS. You're always learning new skills, whether it's medic, demolitions, linguist, covert method of entry, car drills, your weapons drills, new pieces of equipment for doing different sort of getting into buildings or up mountains or vehicles. So there's always new stuff to learn, and it's an exciting place to be because there's always somewhere that's in bother, or there's always a hot spot around the world that you could be off to next. So yeah, it was a great period of my life, and I owe a lot to it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And now, obviously, it gets you used to, like I say, learning and different cultures and different experiences and all of that. So, how does it get? How does life sort of? How do you adapt to life? I suppose once that sort of stops, all of that learning and all of that traveling and cultures and experiences. How does life sort of? How do you deal with life then when that slows down and that stops?
Yeah, and a lot of people can struggle with that because you're going from one extreme to the other in terms of chasing, adrenaline fueled sort of operations and stuff. And for me, I never really had that issue, but I know a lot of people do. And I think one of the things that being in the military, and more specifically special forces, is that it allows you to be able to bend to different environments. You become really adaptable and you're not afraid to embrace change. So, whether you're in the desert, the Arctic, or you've got limited data, you've got to work with a small team, you're on your own for a period. Most special forces guys are quite used to that because they've been thrown from one end into the deep end and somewhere else. So they're not afraid to embrace new skills or new environments or deal with different challenges. And I guess this is a good example. This COVID pops along, and I've went from being very, very busy last year, probably did about 100 talks last year up and down the country and abroad, to be nothing because there's no public events. The cruise ships aren't running, there's no motion capture for the video games, less people taking on stuff for writing, no TV or filming. That's just starting to pick up now. So it's kind of went from 100 miles an hour to very slow. And I guess I'm like a lot of people, and that the way I got around it was I set myself those sort of small, medium, and long-term goals. And so I wrote them down. These are the things I want to do on a sort of daily, weekly basis. These are the things I want to do on a more sort of monthly basis. And these are the big things I want to have done. So, as an example, by the end of COVID, I want to have another book written. So that'll be a book about resilience, so that as and when things become normalized, I've used all my time and I don't have to sit down and think about writing a book when I'm back to being busy again. Smaller goals are just like anybody else's. It'll be things like paint the fence or clean the garage out, or, it might be a good time to paint that wall that's never came round, or do some planting or DIY around the house, learn an online course, a language or something like that. So those are things that, probably most people have come around to doing, but they're helpful because when you tick those goals, you feel like you've achieved something, and you feel like those bigger goals become more attainable and reachable. So I'm like anybody else in terms of setting myself goals and trying to get them done. So by the time this thing has eventually either dissipated or went to an extreme where it's not quite as full on as it was, you felt that you've used your time wisely and that you're able to go again.
Yeah, definitely. I've probably never been more busier than I have been during the lockdown, because I've been in sales all my life, and it was always about finding the right opportunity in the right time. And because I like target and the pressure of target, I find maybe normal time, bit like you with the SS, I guess, normal times not that exciting. I like it to be like under pressure and under target and that sort of thing, and you probably like to be under stress and stuff. So for me, as soon as I seen a crisis, I seen opportunity. I just thought, actually, this is like a major moment in history that's never going to be repeated again, and what can you do with it? And so I wrote a book, I created a podcast, I've been banging out the episodes, doing lots of online events, globally networking, just doing loads of things that you normally wouldn't have time to do, 75-day challenges and exercising every day, and just ticking the things off and just creating massive action and massive energy. Because the way I seen it is it was a bit of a reset. It's a reset. The world's changing. Things are going to change, and that means in every change, in every situation, there are winners and losers. And you can either stick your head in the sand and wait for the world to change and come back to normal again, which it probably never will, or you can actually think, okay, how do I take advantage of this situation? What can I do to benefit from it?
Yeah, and Darwin said that the people that are most successful manage to survive in these aren't the people that are necessarily the best equipped, but those that are best able to deal with change And so, you know, as a beast throughout, that's how we've always ever been. And I think sometimes it's useful because some people that have 100-mile-an-hour life, it's nice to have a period where you're like, right, I've got a week now where I don't have to worry about work. I don't have to worry about this. I'm going to spend a little bit of time, self-reflection, and I'll think about things that are important to me in life. So it might be things like your priorities. What are the things that I'm really interested in and I want to do? It might be a complete career change. It might be moving house somewhere. It might be building something you've been putting off, or it might be writing a book or doing something like that. But always the things that you are doing, when you're doing them 100 miles an hour, day in, week in, month in, you actually get a bit stale because you never take stock and think, right, how could I do this better? Like if I just stopped for a minute and did this, it would save me time, money, effort, energy. And sometimes that's useful as well.
Yeah, definitely. I encourage people to do that in business, to take themselves out of their business, book a week away or a couple of days away or whatever, and actually, you know, um, go away and work on the business and not in it, because when you're in it, you're looking too closely. I always say in the sporting terms, you're looking to the left and to the right to the players either side you and a player running at you, but you're not up in the stands looking at the game and looking at actually where the spaces are on the pitch and where the gaps are and all of that. So sometimes you need to have a different perspective and a different angle to see things from.
Yeah, perspective's really important because you don't know what's right, wrong, good, bad until you compare it with lots of things, not just the thing that's in this immediate environment, but everything. And that's why sometimes travel is important, or you see how other people do things, because then you realize the way we've always done it isn't actually the best way. And perspective's really useful. And that's why either time out or travel or seeing your competitors or seeing how other people do things can give you ideas that just sets you apart and keeps you, in front of everybody else.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously you've had some time to reflect. You've been doing the career in the TV and stuff. Has been sort of, I guess, the big thing that you've been doing since leaving the forces, as well as speaking. Now you've had some time to reflect. Obviously, write the book as well, and you've been writing, etc. What's the big plans? What are you looking to do? When things return back to the new norm, what's the plans for Colin then?
Well, I guess I've always enjoyed speaking. I've always enjoyed sort of teamwork and leadership type workshops that I've created depending on what people are after. So I'd love to continue doing that. And the other good thing about speaking is it can take you around the world on cruises or international companies that bring you in. I'm also, the motion capture for video games is always fresh. There's no 2 days that are the same. So I would always want to continue doing the video game work. TV projects, they always interest me depending on what they are. I'd love to have something along the lines of the Krypton Factor back. I would love to
that used to be amazing, that program. I loved that. It was great.
Yeah, and we've seen remakes of a lot of TV, and so
Yeah.
I'd love to see the Krypton Factor back, and I'd love to be the host of that because I think I bring that sort of hybrid between the mental and the physical, and not just have it sort of one way or the other. I'm doing a lot with the UK Challenge. So a lot of the big Scottish estates up here, we're going to be doing a lot of events and stuff with them and with a load of other companies, TSFE and individuals, corporates. So getting people out there in the big space and then setting them sort of missions, and that'll involve everything from running up hills to rescuing down pilots to navigation and bikes and teamwork, and it'll vary in how sort of tactical and military depending on what the corporates want. So trying to set the wheels in motion for that with a view to some sort of long-term offering, which would be good.
Yeah, well, you should set up an affiliate scheme for that with people who are connected to lots of corporates, because they can sell it on your behalf and make a commission. So that whole reseller affiliate angle I used to do for a corporate company. And actually, if you can get a number of key affiliates who are already connected to the corporates, that's the best way of getting into those corporates, rather than you having to, reach them all yourself, because they can be hard to get hold of, corporates, for various things.
Yeah, and I guess one of it is because I go around a lot of corporates, while I do my talk. So to be able to include it or to mention it at the end is something that this is the end of the talk, but not the end of the road. And, you know, as part of the journey, there's this sort of offering on as big a small a level as you want, but it's exciting and it's different and it's local, it's within the UK, and it can be tailored to what you want. So it doesn't all have to be, you know, running up and down mountains, but it can be a lot about problem solving and the more cognitive side and mission planning. So yeah, looking forward to that and seeing how that takes shape.
Yeah, that sounds like interesting. That'd be a good use of your skills and your time. And, you know, I think, like you say, you know, you've got a lot of skills there, and it's how you just apply those skills to the business world and stuff. And they're all great, you know, transferable skills, if you like, you know.
Yeah, and I think they've always got a charity aspect to them because, you know, I'm ambassador or founder of a number of different charities, and so I've always said that you work for the benefit of being able to free up either time, resources, or finances to be able to help different charities and whatever's personal to you and your own circumstances. So hopefully, Who Dares Cares and some of the other charities I'm involved in will be able to benefit from that long term.
Yeah, definitely. Right, that's the end of part one. Join us for part two, where I'm going to be having a chat with Colin about some more things that he's getting involved in. Speak to you soon. Cheers. Bye.